So today we're going to take this egg-shaped Dollar Tree wreath form and make it into a working wreath form. So first I've started by marking the outer edges of my wreath form. So I used a flexible measuring tape like this, which you can also get at Dollar Tree. And I started by, when I took my measurements, I actually held it up like this and kind of worked it around the wreath form so I could get a more accurate measurement. I started by working from my crossbars, these two bars here at the top, and marked them for my pipe cleaners. Found the center point here and marked it with a pipe cleaner. Now you can see this way this wreath form is bent. This looks like it's off center, but this is actually the center as far as measuring between the two. I ended up with 4 inches here and 4 inches on this side. And I'm going to keep it here because when I put in my deco mesh, I want it to peak at the center, and if I use this at my center, my peak would kind of be over here off center. Then I went down to the bottom of the form and did the same thing. Started with my 2 crossbars. I marked them with pipe cleaners. Then I divided this into thirds. So each of these sections ended up being 3 3/4 inches. Each of these sections here. Then between this crossbar and this crossbar, I measured again, divided it into thirds, and surprisingly ended up again with 3 3/4, 3 3/4, and about 3 3/4. Same thing happened on this side. From one bar to the next, divided it into thirds, and I ended up with 3 3/4, 3 3/4, and approximately 3 3/4. Now these measurements may not be exactly the same for each of the wreath forms because they aren't exact. Like on one I measured, I think this was the one that ended up with 3 3/4 up here. On another one I measured and I ended up with 4 inches on each side here. So as long as you just find your center point, you'll be okay. So excuse my little rocks here. I'm just using them to hold down the pipe cleaner so it won't look so crazy. So again, I started at my top center because I wanted to make sure this wreath had a peak to get that egg shape. So I put my pipe cleaner right next to the other one. We'll see how that works out when I actually start putting in my mesh. And instead of putting it on the inner 2 rings, I actually put it on ring 2 and 3, the 2 center rings. And that is again because I want the peak to go toward the top and not bring it down toward the center of my frame. Then I went to the bottom. I found the center point there to make sure this came out with a nice rounded edge at the bottom. Nice and full because that's the wide, it's wider in here. So I put one here at the center, and then what I did was just measured 4 inches to get my inner measurements. So from here to here was 4 inches, to here is 4 inches, to here is 4 inches, and then surprisingly back to the center was approximately 4 inches. Did the same thing on the other side. 4 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches, and again, this back to the center was approximately 4 inches. So that's how I make my working wreath form out of my Dollar Tree egg-shaped wreath form. In yesterday's video, I used this frame to make a wreath. So you can click the link above to see how that wreath turned out. I didn't get as much of the egg shape as I would have liked, but it did at least look oval. All right, thank you for spending this time with me, and I'll talk with you again real soon.